He had billions in his bank account. But not a single soul who truly loved him. So one night, a world-famous billionaire vanished without a trace, walked away from private jets, red carpets, and boardrooms. And reappeared as a poor, nameless construction worker in a forgotten little town. No one recognized him. No one cared who he used to be. Until he met her, a barefoot rice seller with nothing but dignity in her voice and fire in her soul. She didn't know he was rich. He didn't tell her. But somewhere between the dust and the struggle, he fell in love. This isn't just a love story. It's about truth, sacrifice, and what it really means to be rich. Subscribe to the Hidden Republic channel for more videos. Julian Royce sat alone at the head of a diamond-studded table, surrounded by 100 people, and not one of them truly knew him. Laughter echoed around the grand ballroom. Golden chandeliers sparkled like falling stars. Champagne flowed like rivers, and the guests, Hollywood elites, Fortune 500 CEOs, influencers with millions of followers, clinked glasses and whispered about his net worth, not his soul. It was his 35th birthday. And yet, he'd never felt more hollow. His assistant handed him a velvet box. Inside was a rare Swiss watch worth more than a working man's yearly salary. People cheered, sang, posted selfies with him like he was a trophy. But Julian wasn't smiling. His eyes searched the crowd for something, someone real. But there was no one. His father, who built the empire, was long gone. His mother passed when he was 10. The women he dated saw only his bank balance, not his brokenness. His business partners would sell him out if it raised their stocks. He raised his glass to fake friends, fake smiles, and a life built on lies. And then, with no warning, he stood up, walked away from his own party, and disappeared. No driver. No security. Just Julian, in silence, breathing in the night air as he left behind billions in wealth and an identity carved by legacy, not by love. 3 days later, in a quiet, dusty town miles away from the glimmer of city lights, a man named Jay walked onto a construction site with calloused hands and steel-toe boots. No one knew that this new worker once owned construction companies bigger than the entire town. No one recognized the billionaire hiding beneath the sweat-stained shirt and $5 jeans. And for the first time in years, Julian Royce felt something he hadn't felt in a lifetime: peace. Just the rhythm of a hammer. The dust of the earth. The sore muscles that reminded him he was human. And yet, behind the peace, there was an ache. An emptiness that no amount of hard labor could fix. He had escaped the cage of wealth. But he hadn't found love, not yet. Not until he met her. Every evening, after long hours of back-breaking labor under the scorching sun, Jay, once Julian Royce, walked past the same street corner. It wasn't special by most standards. Just a cracked sidewalk, a rusted pole, and a tarp tied between 2 trees. But there, beneath that flimsy tarp, stood a young woman who made the whole town seem to stop. She wore simple cotton dresses that had seen better days. Her hands were rough from lifting heavy sacks. Her sandals were worn down to their soles. But her eyes held something that money couldn't buy: resilience. And when she smiled, just a small, quiet curve of the lips, it felt warmer than any $1,000,000 sunset Julian had ever seen. Her name was Lena. She sold rice in uneven sacks, weighed by hand on an old mechanical scale. Most days, she had no umbrella to shield her from the rain. No signboard. No help. Just her and a little notebook where she carefully marked the debts of loyal customers who couldn't afford to pay right away. Jay started buying a sack every evening. He had no idea what to do with it. His rented room didn't even have a stove. But it gave him an excuse to talk to her. To see her. He'd ask questions just to keep her talking. Why rice? Because everyone needs to eat. Even the poor. Don't you ever get tired? All the time. But tired is better than helpless. She told him stories. How her father died of a lung infection when she was 13. How her mother's kidneys were failing. How she dropped out of school to take care of her. She smiled through it all, never once asking for pity. One day, Jay offered to help her carry a sack to her house. She hesitated, then agreed. As they walked through the narrow alleyways, he saw where she lived, a one-room cement box with no fan, a leaking ceiling, and her mother sleeping on a thin mattress beside a rusted cooler. And still, there were fresh flowers in a tin can on the window. Still, the floor was swept clean. Still, Lena looked at her life as though it were enough. That night, Jay sat alone in his room, staring at the rice sack in the corner. He thought about the lavish feasts he used to complain about. The private chefs. The tasteless luxury. He thought about Lena feeding her mother with her own hands, rice she'd carried on her back. And in that moment, the billionaire who once ruled over millions, felt small. He'd escaped a life of gold, only to find real worth in a woman who had none. But what he didn't know was that he wasn't just falling for Lena. He was falling into a love that would test everything he'd ever believed. As the days turned into weeks, Jay and Lena's bond grew deeper, like two seeds planted in the same storm, growing toward each other without even realizing it. Every evening, after work, Jay would show up like clockwork, not just to buy rice, but to share quiet conversations, borrowed laughter, and unspoken warmth. He helped her arrange sacks when her back hurt. She brought him lunch wrapped in banana leaves when she found out he skipped meals. Sometimes, they sat silently side by side, watching the town go dark, the sky paint itself in burnt orange. And then came the question that haunted Jay more with each passing day. How long could he keep lying to her? Because that's what it was, a lie. Lena thought he was a man like her. A construction worker. A drifter with no big dreams, just a decent heart and a strong back. But Jay was Julian Royce. One of the richest men in the country. The son of a business empire. A man who once closed billion-dollar deals before lunch and had world leaders on speed dial. He wanted to tell her the truth. Every time she looked at him with those trusting eyes, he felt the guilt knot in his throat. But he didn't dare. Because deep down, he was terrified. What if she only sees the money once I tell her? What if she stops loving Jay, the man, and starts chasing Julian, the billionaire? He couldn't bear that. Because for the first time in his life, someone loved him without a price tag. But fate didn't care for secrets. One humid evening, dark clouds rolled in. The rain came down in violent sheets. Jay rushed to Lena's corner, but the stall was gone. Flattened. Bags of rice ruined. The tarp shredded and flapping in the wind. He found her drenched, barefoot, dragging what she could salvage toward her tiny home. Her hands bleeding. Her eyes swollen. But it wasn't just the rice. My mother's in pain. She needs dialysis. Today. But the hospital won't admit her without advance payment, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to do. Jay felt his chest crack open. He could help her right now. One call. One signature. He had millions. Her mother could be saved in seconds. But if he pulled out that kind of money, everything would unravel. And so, with a heart torn in half, he did the one thing he never thought he'd do. He left. Without a word. He flew back to the city, changed back into his suit, and moved like a ghost through his own corporate kingdom. Within hours, Lena's mother was admitted to the city's best hospital. Paid in full, under the name Anonymous Donor. But Lena never knew. She waited for Jay for 3 days. Then 5. Then 10. No messages. No goodbye. Just silence. And the man who promised her kindness became just another name in a long list of people who disappeared when she needed them the most. 2 months passed. 2 long, aching months. Lena went back to selling rice, but something in her had changed. Her hands still worked, her feet still walked, her lips still smiled for customers, but her heart wasn't whole. Her Jay, had vanished like a dream. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. And though her mother had recovered, miraculously admitted to a hospital far beyond what they could afford, the unanswered questions still burned in her chest. Had he lied to her? Had she been a fool to trust a man with calloused hands and kind eyes? She kept replaying their moments, his laughter, the way he listened, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. But the silence screamed louder than the memories. Then one morning, just as she was opening her stall, a black SUV rolled into the dusty street. It didn't belong here. The townspeople paused. Children stopped playing. Vendors froze, watching the sleek, tinted car parked near Lena's stall. A suited man stepped out first. Then the rear door opened. And out stepped Julian Royce. Not Jay. Not the man in boots and jeans. But Julian Royce, the billionaire. The same man whose face she had seen on newspapers her neighbors used to wrap vegetables. The man on magazine covers behind glass store windows. She couldn't breathe. He walked toward her, no security holding him back. No walls. Just him. And she, barefoot, her dress stained with rice dust, stood frozen behind her stall. "Lena," he said, gently, his voice raw. "Why are you here?" she asked, eyes wide, voice shaking. "What are you doing dressed like that? Who are you?" No, Julian took a breath. His eyes were full of regret, of longing, of fear. "I should have told you the truth from the start. My name is Julian Royce. I own Royce Enterprises. But when I met you, I wasn't looking to be a billionaire. I just wanted to be a man again. I wanted to be seen for who I really was." 1 year later, the sun rose over the same little street corner. But things had changed. The stall was no longer just a tarp tied between two trees. It had a sturdy roof now, built from timber and painted a soft yellow. There were neat wooden shelves holding different varieties of rice, jasmine, basmati, brown. There was a fan gently humming overhead, and a small sign that read, "Lena's Rice House, grown with love." But the biggest change wasn't the stall. It was the people behind it. There stood Lena, in a simple dress, laughing as she taught a young girl how to tie a rice sack. Beside her was an older woman, her mother, healthy and glowing, finally living without pain. And right next to them, loading a sack onto a customer's motorbike, was a man in rolled-up sleeves and dusty boots. Not a bodyguard. Not a chauffeur. Julian Royce, billionaire, business magnate, and now, full-time husband and part-time rice seller. He still wore that old watch she had once fixed for him when the strap broke. He still wiped sweat from his brow with the edge of his shirt. But the difference was that now, the world knew who he was. And he no longer had to hide. Because he'd found the only identity that mattered. Lena's partner. Lena's Jay. After the day he revealed the truth, she didn't accept him immediately. It took time, conversations, apologies, proof that his love wasn't just a fairy tale wrapped in wealth. But Julian waited. He showed up every day. Helped rebuild the stall. Helped deliver rice bags to loyal customers. Ate meals sitting on the floor with her mother. Smiled at the simple things. And when Lena finally whispered yes to his proposal, under a starlit sky with no cameras, no press, just their hands clasped together, it wasn't about castles or cars. It was about coming home. Now, Julian had started using his billions differently. Quietly. He built a community clinic in the town, named after Lena's father. He opened a free school for girls. He created small grants for struggling vendors, especially single mothers. He didn't announce any of it on social media. There were no red carpets or interviews. Just acts of love, hidden behind his old nickname, Jay. And every night, When the stall closed and the streetlights flickered on, he and Lena sat on the same old bench under the tree where they'd first talked. They shared a simple plate of rice and curry, cooked by Lena, always with too much chile, and they laughed like two souls who had finally stopped running. Julian once had everything, and yet felt empty. Now, he had almost nothing money could measure. But he was full. Because in a world obsessed with power, with image, with wealth, he had fallen in love with a woman who sold rice from a street corner. And through her, he had discovered a life richer than anything his fortune had ever bought.